Welcome. I do believe we're going to have a wonderful, afternoon of poetry because we have two terrific poets with us. Before we get started with both of them reading, I want to let you know that their books are available for order through us. The stash of Susan's books, which we already had, which is a pretty big stash, is already sold out. But more are coming. They just hadn't arrived yet. So you can reserve her new book, or you can order either her Susan's books or Meredith's books downstairs from our staff. So rest assured, you can get a copy. Okay, we have two fabulous readers with us today. First up is going to be Meredith Holmes. Meredith grew up in South Jersey and has lived for many years in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. In the 1970s, she was part of Big Mama, a feminist poetry theater group that performed nationally, and she's published 2 collections of poetry. In 2005, she was selected to be the first Poet Laureate of Cleveland Heights and served a second term in 2015. Pond Road Press has published 2 of her collections, Shubad's Crown and Familiar at First, Then Strange, which was in 2015. Her poems have been published in Literary Mama, Mid-Atlantic Review, Evening Street, Blue Earth Review, and Spoon River Poetry Review, among others, and in several anthologies, including Garrison Keillor's Good Poems for Bad Times. Meredith works as a freelance writer. She specializes in workplace issues and women in technology and politics. Meredith is going to be followed by Susan Nusbaum. Susan Dworsky Nusbaum is the author of 4 full-length poetry collections: What We Take With Us, Open Wide the Eye, Alive in This Place, and her newest is This Uncertain Voyage. She was born in Rochester, New York. She received a BA from Smith College and a law degree from the University of Buffalo Law School. She lives in Buffalo, where she raised her family and worked as a musician, teacher, arts administrator, and most recently as an attorney. I think a prosecuting attorney, right? Oh, this is a woman of power. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the Connecticut River Review, Poetry East, Woven Tale Press, Nimrod International Journal, Chautauqua Literary Journal, Calliope, Harper Pallet, Wisconsin Review, the Sow's Ear, a celebration of Western New York poets, and the Buffalo News. And I'm so happy that the Buffalo News might print a poem. That's encouraging, isn't it? She has presented her work in solo public readings in several communities in both the Northeast and in Florida. Welcome both of our poets with a little bit of applause and anticipation of how wonderful they're going to be. And then let me welcome Meredith Holmes to the microphone.
Thank you, Georgia. It's really nice to be here, and I'm so glad to see all of you coming into a poetry reading on a beautiful day. Oh, every day here is beautiful. It's not like at home where it's a real sacrifice to be inside on a day like this because there won't be another one for 30 days. I'll begin with a poem called Emerging, and emerging is a big buzzword these days in literary circles, and we understand it mostly to mean young. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized in my own experience, emerging or coming into your own is a lifelong process. Emerging. Think of me as a 17-year locust, delayed by drought for 2 full cycles, feeding on the hair roots of deciduous trees. So yes, I am finally coming to the surface, having bored a tunnel just wide enough for one, and when I unfold a 6-legged fact born through a hole in the ground, I wonder what you will make of my shrilling. If emerging means the new growth at the top of rainforest giants, opening like green-ribbed umbrellas 200 feet above the forest floor, then yes, I'm that too. I began in the leaf litter, scant rain and scarce light at the bottom. Gained a foothold in the understory, region of striving big cats and camouflage snakes who fang to life in seconds. Then the canopy, more light and blossoming epiphytes. Finally, the emergent layer. All that sky and empty space, I thought I'd see the future, but the past is what comes clear to me now. And I'll read from my most recent book, two poems in the same vein. This first one I wrote after arranging an interview with somebody who didn't know me, and I had to describe, we were meeting in a crowded place, and I had to describe myself, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought he would have trouble finding me. How you'll recognize me. I'll wait by the door. I'll be wearing a long black coat and gray mittens. I'll have brown hair, medium brown, medium long. I'll be the medium girl by the door, with a notebook and a pen. I'll be the skinny girl in cutoffs and glasses. I'll be the wallflower waiting by the door, the girl in a white blouse to whom nothing is ever going to happen. I'll be empty-handed except for the notebook. I'll be the one who did it on the bleachers in a bed of moss and under the old apple tree. I'll be waiting by the door, and I'll have red hair and bird and star earrings. I'll be holding a small child by the hand, and I'll look as if I've seen a ghost. I'll be so bundled up in my black coat, you won't recognize me. I'll be carrying a notebook, and I'll be waiting by the door. And Katha Pollitt is one of my very favorite writers. She's both a fiction writer and a journalist. And I wrote this sort of in homage to her poem, Turning 30, which I thought was a wonderful poem and really struck home. Turning 60. Such were the immediate preoccupations. Your daughter sawing the umbilical cord with an old dull knife. Your mother's ghost rattling the silverware. Your siblings obeying the rules of atmospheric perspective and disappearing into the out-of-state distance. That your 60th birthday passed without notice. Everybody says you look younger than you are, and you go along, for once believing wholeheartedly in a truth that's only skin deep. You color your hair, a deception unthinkable to your 20-something self. You think you set aside the spooling third-person narrative that places you at the center of a subtle yet affecting novel about your life so far. But you notice there's a car vibrating in the driveway, the doorbell's ringing, and you're not ready. Your high school friends make jokes about being old that you don't think are funny at all, because they have aged shockingly and laughing with crumpled faces, and because you got such a late start on everything. You have only now grabbed the bridle of the shy, fickle horse you recognize as your own life. And the rest of the poems I'm going to read are all about work, from a manuscript I'm working on that chronicles almost all the jobs I've had. I wouldn't say I've had a career, I've had a lot of jobs. I come from hardworking parents, and all the women in my family worked, including my grandmother, and this is a poem about her. Elsie Mahoney, postmistress of Long Hill, Connecticut. My mother always said my grandfather got that post office job just because he was a Democrat, and because the old smithy the post office wanted for the new station was on his property. My grandfather had no capacity for work, but my grandmother did, and she became postmistress, walking out the side door and down the driveway to the smithy every morning at 7 and back again at 5. After dinner, she perched on a stool topped with a pillow and worked at the kitchen table where the light was good, balancing the post office books. She was never issued an adding machine, but my grandmother was good with numbers, and she accounted for every package, letter, and stamp. Sometimes my Uncle Dan would stop by with a stew or cobbler, and my grandmother would be so absorbed in her work she wouldn't realize he was standing there. And then, startled, she'd look up from the big green ledger and the pages full of figures in her firm, graceful hand. I majored in English, of course, and was completely unprepared to do anything that would earn me a living. Recent grad. I'm an English major. Plus, I lack the armor essential to survival in this machine tool town that spits spring sleet and sex-segregated job ads. Job-wise, Cleveland gives me the cold shoulder. And I'm alone here. No Sunday dinner aunts gamely tossing a knotted rope across the aged gap, asking, how's the apartment? How's the job? No sisters to gossip, dish, and shop with. It's 2 days hard rowing from the warrens I temp in to the chapel of trees where I grew up, where my parents wait, still bullish on my bachelor's paying its good job dividend as theirs did so long ago. For a few years I worked at temp jobs. I worked for a temp agency that placed me in businesses all over the city, most of which I now realize were on their last legs at the time. This was in the 70s when so many manufacturing cities underwent the same kinds of changes. Acme, Cleveland. In personnel, a stocky, permed woman at a green desk greets me. College, I see. Do you want to teach? I was ready for this. No, I want to write. She smiles. Oh, well then, we better watch what we say around here. I'm stunned. She believes me. I am buoyed by this as she leads me up 2 flights of ringing metal stairs into a vast fluorescent lit space. Aisles and aisles of file cabinets, which I scan for something worthy of words on paper. But all I can think of is Cairo's City of the Dead, where I once read, thousands live above ground, keeping house among tombs and obelisks. I don't regret all the jobs I had, all these jobs, which were crushingly boring at the time, but I'm glad I met the people I did. I'm glad I worked with them. They were quite memorable. A lot of them, I think a lot of the women I worked with had been, they were in clerical jobs, but they had been Rosies when the plant at this particular place had really been roaring during the war. And then they were the ones left who still wanted to work, and they were removed from their line jobs and put up in clerical jobs. Helen. Our Helen is dark-haired and wide-breasted, almost 50, with that high, strained voice some women from eastern Pennsylvania have. The other Helen, the ancient Greek one, so prized for her golden hair and tawny skin, must have aged also, but after the war, the old king took her back to Sparta. It pays to be a goddess. Andy, Andy, give me some of your candy, Helen shrills to one of her old boyfriends who sidles over, belly straining his work shirt, a blueprint to be copied in his hand. He looks down, veins in his nose reddening. Unembarrassed, Helen smiles a glass smile. In the break room, the women admit, yes, Helen was a beauty in her day, and fun-loving. That dark hair, those long legs. She chased Andy for years. No, he chased her. 3 wives, Helen in between. She was willing. No, she wasn't. There are many versions. For me, Helen sketches her apartment's floor plan. It's cute. Archway to the kitchen, breakfast nook is over here, and this door leads to my bedroom. That's where I lead men into temptation. Beat, beat. She waits to see how I take this. Then she laughs. Just kidding. I know her rooms are undisturbed. The fluorescent lighting singing off key. Floor spotless. Waiting for the plant to fire up again. one of the things I had to learn to do in my early working life was how to quit. And I had some help from my friends. I had one friend who was very blasé. I really admired her panache. She said, "Oh, I've quit lots of jobs. It gets easier the more you do it." Time to quit. It's spring, really spring, this May morning. Not that tentative nonsense we put up with all April. The whole big load dumped at once. Mowers are thrumming, leaves are bannering the branches. What had snarled now hums and sings as I walk through it to the bus shelter, where the woman with the Imogene coca bangs is smoking her first cigarette. She never smiles or even says good morning, but she likes me to sit in there with her so she can complain about her boss at Ohio, and then her landlord, and then her boss again. She is wearing a new, expensive-looking spring coat, I can see. I stop walking. The poplars have strewn catkins on the walk in honor of this day. If I join Imogene Coca in the bus shelter, she'll start talking, and then the bus will come, and I'll have to get on. Then I'll have to get off when it comes to 152nd Street, and I'll have to go in with all the others. I turn around. One phone call, and spring is mine. When I finally landed a job that actually used my degree, it was a different world, but not a perfect one. Brief interval, Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. Pants for women are frowned on here, so I wear skirts and suit jackets, and I've learned how to tie a neck scarf that softens the button down. A friend who has never worked in an office calls these duds my bank costume. Accurate, since I feel I am masquerading. I'm editor of Economic Trends and conversant in M1, M2, and GNP. The Italian Renaissance-style bank building looks like an art museum or a Venetian Doge's palace, but it's a temple to cold, hard cash. Behind the feminine pink marble facade is a steel vault the size of a blast furnace to store money, a fleet of armored trucks to move it, and an incinerator to destroy it. I swear the thin-lipped Woodrow Wilson era founders of this place were into numerology. The bank executives all work on the richly carpeted 8th floor, 8 for prosperity, and perfect for these ample 80s, the decade of loosened belts and concentrating cash. Here too are the paneled quarters of the bank president, the first woman ever to hold this job, hired when she was 8 months pregnant. Economists on 12 wrestle the monthly whims of the queen of social sciences into statistical models, removing the all-too-female taint of eggs, moons, and mothers. Just above hovers the 13th floor, officially called the mezzanine, a bit of ordinal subterfuge, disguising the realm of the occult, cats, crossroads, and predictions made by the inexpert. 12 plus 1, where the 1 undoes everything. Chaos and a mutant gene. 13 is the top floor and floats between 12 and the empty blue air, into which a young female employee, unhappy in love, I always thought maybe she was unhappy in work, leapt one day in 1927, bravely prefiguring the trip so many men took 2 years later. Our elevator glides up the shaft, burps politely, and stops at 10. Beaten brass doors purr apart, and I can almost smell the wealth that holds this place together. We spill out, heels and wingtips pinging like coins spilled onto the stone floor. One morning in the lobby of the Rockefeller building, something becomes clear. I wish I could slow down this hour before work, stretch it out, and make it hang in big, taffy sweet loops so I would never arrive at 8:30. But I run, insincerely, all the way to the train station and up the puddled stairs to the breezy platform with its commanding view of rush hour traffic plunging down the hill, under us and away. And of course the train I don't want comes first, but finally the brilliant eye of the westbound appears, flinging doors open and lurching us to our seats. And oh, the passive bliss of book and window seat. And in the summer, the 79th Street Railroad Bridge is festooned with wild honeysuckle drenched in clean light. And on this industrial route, the only beautiful sight, which I have just seconds to enjoy before we're shot into graffiti darkness and brought to a gear-shrieking stop at the station under the city's tallest building, the crushing weight of which I notice every morning as we are delivered from train to commuter's crypt. I sprint up the concourse into the muted gold day of the Superior exit, where I spot Anne, she works on my floor, speed walking to the Rock, black beret askew, coat sash flying, a relief, since if I have reliable, punctual Anne in my sights, I won't be late. Both of us taking the crosswalk at a dead run and throwing ourselves on the mercy of the revolving door, which dispenses us into the lobby, genteelly presided over by Max, white-haired in a blue jacket with gold braid, bowing us to the next up elevator. And finally, wondering how Max gets to work, I realize seeing him in the morning is the only thing I like about my job. For about 10 years, I worked at my alma mater, and I thought it would be so wonderful to work at a university. But what I hadn't realized in the years that I was working in actual corporations, how corporate the universities had become. Warrior pose. 6 weeks after I started this job, my boss, ex-reporter with a lopsided gait, told us, "I'm out of here. This place is being run like a sorority." The second one, all his stories had to do with booze, said a few days before he got canned, "You've all done yeoman's work." I thought this might be a compliment, but I looked up yeoman and discovered it meant retainer, subordinate, those in the middle ranks of household servants. The next one was hippo-like with a perfect manicure. "You've had a challenging year. Sign here." The latest one called me into his office to say, making eye contact with the doorway behind me, "We think you'd be happier somewhere else." I'm doomed. I'm prey. A delicious herbivore separated from the herd. "This is not a democracy," was how he ended the conversation. I should be tougher. I should get tougher. I close my office door and do warrior pose to improve focus, harden resolve. My body is a bowstring pulled tight, my mind an arrow. I bend my forward knee and meditate on my future, unable to banish thoughts of a magazine story I just read about how modern management, with its hierarchies and efficiencies, was invented by a high-level ex-Nazi. Knowing this does not give me advantage. Knowledge is not power. Only power is power. Dear prestigious Middle Atlantic University, G, as you know from his CV, used to work here. He was our boss in university relations, and we sincerely wish you had consulted us before you hired him. Don't be fooled by his collegial manner. He is a viper. This is mostly a metaphor, and we intend no insult to actual snakes. They just do what they do, moving gracefully and with great economy when they cross your path, even when startled. You should inform yourselves about snakes, however, because they can inflict real harm. And that is why those of us remaining in G's old department are sending you Field Guide to Snakes of North America. You've probably noticed that G usually wears a sweater vest, gray or blue. The vests were the only thing he was honest about, and the only thing we figured out immediately. He's always cold. I have marked the relevant entry in the Field Guide, but in case you don't get to it right away, here's what it says. Viperidae, a family of venomous snakes with long, hinged fangs that permit deep penetration of venom. feel this enormous pressure to end on a positive note. So I will. I can do that. I can do it truthfully. I did get another job at the university, which was absolutely wonderful. Joy at work, of all places. My office is high-ceilinged, narrow, a window at one end, a door at the other. Few students come to this end of the hall. I make my own hours. I have my own key. The solitude, the agency. Home to modern languages and anthropology, this building is poorly networked, the estate of impoverished gentry. Classrooms are small, staff few, furniture shabby. The big noise and money are across campus in the glass skyscrapers of electrical engineering. To get to that side of things, you walk a path of bricks laid in a pattern of ones and zeros. The anthropology professor I work for visits once a week. He knocks politely. He's happy with my work. Now a boreal wind is bringing snow. Snow fills the courtyard outside, my window with chalk dust flurries, and I am pulled out of my chair and up into the gauzy, snow-swirled air, where I sail and twirl like a shtetl bride in a Chagall painting. My village, my office, my desk below, nothing can touch me. Thank you.
Well, that was just lovely. Thank you. That was wonderful. And thank you, Georgia, for your lovely introduction. It's wonderful to be here, to see all of you. Some of my old friends. You can't hear me, Jane? Uh-oh. Is that better? Yeah. Oh, I'll try to do that. Okay. I'm going to be reading only from my latest book, This Uncertain Voyage. And it's really about the ambiguities of life, not just the joys and the sadnesses, but the changed perceptions that we have of what's real in our lives. Constantly changing what we once knew and now don't. Revisiting our personal memories, our opinions, our family relationships, our visions for the future. We're all fellow voyagers, finding new meaning in the uncertainty of life and a new appreciation for the world that we inhabit. The book is in 4 sections, and I'm going to read a little bit from each section. And all of the sections have phrases from a poem that's within that section as a title. So the first section is called Beheld, but Not Held. And it approaches remembered experiences from a distance, often seeing old photos or artworks and even listening to familiar music. Our perspectives change as we revisit our memories. And the first poem in the book is called Dragonflies. And it's written after a photograph that was done by my daughter-in-law, Mary Jane. And the photograph was taken through a window screen. And it's called Crane Flies Mating as Junebug Looks On. It's called Dragonflies. 2 slender dragonflies rest lightly on the outside of a screen, mirrored end to end. Transparencies of wings scored by wire mesh squares. Natural grace, visible but untouchable. This remoteness, what is, what was. Beheld but not held. Sifted images floating on mesh, on lens, on cornea.
Look again. Read the title. No, not dragonflies, but common crane flies. Not juxtaposed, but common, but mating. Their final act before dying. Wings flared, filament limbs outstretched. Silent for all I know. A fat June bug, mesh embroidered, has a clear view from one corner, absorbing every rustle, every quiver. This section has another, a group of poems called Kinderscenen, or Scenes from Childhood, so you can tell what that's about. And I'm gonna read two of those. This one is called Born Yesterday. Every wintry Saturday, safe from the tramp of goose steps over there, my sister and I would read plays aloud from a collection our mother got from the Book of the Month Club. Best American Plays, 1940 to 1945. Those were the years our boys marched off and came back, or didn't. Snug under an Afghan on the studio couch, we divvied up parts. I, the younger, got butler or third bystander, my sister helping me with the hard words. She inhabited the important roles. Timid Laura in The Glass Menagerie, the evil count in Watch on the Rhine, our town's Emily. Oblivious, we breezed through scene after scene, stories about frustration and lost dreams, betrayal and suicide, hunger and war, sniggering at words we didn't understand but knew were off limits, like gigolo and slut and Gestapo, pausing for a moment when Emily suddenly cries from her grave. I never realized before how troubled and how in the dark live persons are. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. And another one from that group is called Inheritance. My mother's table, small, marble-topped, found a new home beside the wing chair in one corner of my living room. Still wobbly, loosened during my childhood by a long history of use, weighed down by stacks of storybooks and novels, Majolica ashtray, an occasional philodendron, the assemblage so heavy its feet wore grooves in Mother's screen wall to wall. My inheritance, a cushiony lap, blue-veined hands turning pages, as vibrations of Schumann, scent of Estée, swoosh of slip against stockings settle around it. An irrevocable trust, this magnetic field. I'm heir to the air. Maybe some of you have had this experience. Hotel. Home away from home, says the brochure. So orderly, so cool. I fling my suitcase on the bed, sink into a wing chair, glance at walls hung with photos of pastel hydrangeas, hang my clothes in a roomy closet while a white one-size-fits-all bathrobe waits for me after my shower. How delightful that someone else will clean this bathroom, change these sheets, that the bed will be turned down by invisible hands, a mint poised on the crisp pillowcase. Nothing here belongs to me. No family photos to remind me of old times, or no inherited furniture to conjure the faces of dead parents. No neighbors ringing my doorbell for a little olive oil and conversation. No decisions to make. Should I reupholster the couch? Paint the dining room ceiling? There's no clutter. Nothing to trip over. Nothing to cry over. A week away in a warm climate. Only 144 more hours to go. Okay, the second section is called Just Around the Bend, and it revisits life's upheavals caused by tragedies and loss, inevitable, yet we do not break, learning acceptance and survival techniques for our ongoing lives. Hush. On the morning of your death, as the moon began to disappear, I was startled awake, not by the rush of departure, but by a hush, a whisper of consonants, as if a fermata had stopped the flow of time, marking the end of a symphonic passage, its bird's eye widening to recapture sonorities lost in the stillness. No doubt some sounds lingered that morning, whir of the ceiling fan, water hissing in pipes inside the thick walls of our house. Surely branches scratched against our bedroom window and doves spilled their vowels into the empty air. I could not hear the dawn because your voice was missing, and the day broke without you. That was breaking. This is bending. Bending. From my Adirondack chair, I watched tall grasses dance at the wood's edge. Honey locusts bow in the wind, unbroken. Rainbows trace the arcs of finches and jays as they soar from feeder to nest. And nodding on their supple stems, daylilies turn their faces into the sun. You, my beloved new husband, appear at the screen door of our cottage, holding it open with your elbow, fingers curled around the handles of 2 warm mugs. You bend to kiss me. How miraculous that we may change course intact, our passions refreshed, finding new paths. Leaning in, we turn the soil, searching for nourishment as we grow toward the morning light, bending to stay alive. Hunger. A steamy plate of polenta and shrimp ragu, night redolent with the spice of skin, sifting into downy comfort, fullness of shoulder tucked beneath shoulder, thigh on thigh, arms askew. It's easy to forget for a moment the hump of pillows piled across the bed. Bit by bit, memory returns. Bit by bit, longing seeps into the ragged texture of dreams. Ripples of appetite lap at the edge of absence. The taste of granola, spill of cornmeal, tomato paste dried on the counter. The lingering sea smell of crustaceans cracked and peeled and eaten. No sensation sharp enough to break the fast. Hunger feasts on remembering. Maybe some of you know this song. Remember this song. It's an old one by Ella Fitzgerald. These foolish things. It's not the bottle of wine away in the cupboard. or the pink stain on the white carpet, not the glass beads you bought me in Murano, or the silly grin you wore in our wedding pictures, or the yellow orchid I bought you as you were dying, or your driver's license saved in my top drawer. It's the warm breath from the bedroom window stirring my hair. Oh, how your arms cling around my shoulders, ghostly whispers in my ear. And still, my heart has wings. And the last one in this section is a narrative poem, and it's probably the longest one, but anyway, it's a true story. Thunder. Mrs. Edmonds sold corsets in my father's store, discreetly encircled each dimpled thigh, matronly overhang to assure a perfectly supported torso, her own figure slim, shapely in a pastel blue suit, her rust gray perm secured with a bobby pin. On Saturday afternoons, she fed me red licorice while I read comic books and modeled ladies' hats before the three-way mirror. And every Christmas Eve, she appeared at our house with her only child, Keith, to deliver a fruitcake baked in a Maxwell House tin. One day she called my father to say she wouldn't be in. Lightning had struck and killed her Keith as he was picking cherries from their tree. Mrs. E turned ashen, lumpy, her hair thinned and hung unpinned. Her breath smelled overripe, like juicy fruit and cigarettes. Soon no one wore corsets anymore, and she flickered away. I never knew her first name. Even now, when lightning rips the summer sky, I count down the seconds until the clap of thunder. Picture a boy sprawled jagged on the grass, blood-bright spill of cherries across the lawn, odors of ozone and red licorice hanging in air. The third section is called Breathing, and it really deals with the dilemmas that our country finds, the dilemma that our country finds itself in. Racism and complacency, division in this country, and how our opinions and responses change to meet the needs of a beleaguered nation. And I'm only going to read one from this section. It's called Lady Liberty. On nice days, she hung the wet wash on the backyard clothesline to whiten in the sun. Her right arm raised high like a sentinel, clutching a corner of a bedsheet. Her left reaching down so I could hand her a wooden clothespin from the bag. Without halo or torch, this daughter of the tempest tossed loved her country unconditionally, belted out God Bless America right along with Kate Smith. She was proud her family made it, declined to travel abroad with my father, insisting, I'll stay here in the good old USA, the best country on earth. Surely she must have read of lynchings and Japanese detention camps, knew our own family was unwelcome in certain neighborhoods and clubs, and more than once had been called a dirty Jew. Today, bloodstains spread in plain sight across our flag, massacres commonplace, violence almost expected in grocery stores, schools, churches, and synagogues. Would my mother bleach them from her mind? Would she dry them in the sun? Would she lift her voice in praise? And the last section is entitled This Accidental Habitat. And it examines new discoveries about the universe, our immersion in the natural environment, and a new gratitude for this endangered world and our determination to preserve it. The first two I'm going to read are from Sarasota area. A couple of years ago, I was happy to be staying on Longboat Key, and so these two poems are a result of that. So I decided you might like to hear them. The first one, this one I wrote actually while I was there. It's called Tropical Sunrise. I exchanged my down parka for a light blue cardigan, winter's gray for a limpid sky, for this view of the sunrise from the lanai, its flamboyance deepening and lifting through the mangroves on the bay, singeing the horizon, tips of palms, waves tinged with pomegranate and tangerine. Every morning I watch tiny squares of window screen dissolve in sparks, illuminating the landscape. Flocks of crested egrets, yellow masked anhinga, dolphins summoned from their dark grottos, fishermen from warm beds. As a giant kaleidoscope refracts the newborn day across a waiting world. And this one I wrote when I came home. So it's called Watching for Manatees. A trace of tropical suntan still colors my skin, now wind buffeted as I return to the northern dry cold. Inside the wintry solitude of home, war rages in Ukraine. On my screen, in my mind, its borders violated. As I search for tranquility along the shoals of memory, where immense elliptical shadows glide beneath the surface, whiskers parting ripples, bubbles dissolving in air, their shapes fade in the shade of a dock, drift to the far side, disappear into dark waves of seagrass, a murky sludge, emerging in undulating pods. They do not lose their way, do not sense the danger of their dwindling habitat, or turn to watch me watching them. But I can feel their nudge as we press together along this uncertain voyage. Here's another one about an animal, and it's from a newspaper headline. And this is the headline. Scientists confirm elephant in South Korea can reproduce speech. It's from the Associated Press. Okay. The elephant speaks of love. Why are we surprised to read that another mammal feels the anguish of isolation so deeply he learns to reproduce his trainer's speech? That Koshik, the circus performer, has taught himself the elaborate technique of placing the tip of his trunk into his mouth to imitate the frequencies of Korean words, the sounds his trainer, his only companion, makes. Separated from his own kind, he scarcely remembers their comforting snorts and bellows, slurps and growls. What creature wouldn't find a way to greet his only friend? Koshik knows the power of words to bring rewards, nourishment, whispered endearments, the attentions of a trainer who gazes like a grateful lover into the animal's watery eye, leans a cheek against his rough haunches, and caresses his articulate trunk, spent with language. All right, the last 3 poems are for my snowbird friends who are only here for the winter, but I just want to remind you about what's going on back there. The first one is called Black Ice. At 3 below, our breath collects the color blue. The path turns white with lace adrift on earth, hard frozen. Beneath our boots, remnants of past seasons, scatterings of yellow leaves, twisted vines, spinners and petals torn in random patterns, impaled at the edges of a dark mirror. Resplendent as the night sky, spangled with lights and transparencies, altered perceptions, black holes, the treachery of foothold exposed. Dizzy with uncertainty, we hold each other's elbows, lurch side to side, panting through pursed lips, patchy faces raw with resolve. And lest we lose our footing, a cold wind warns us. Step lightly, travelers. Measure your pace. Hallelujah. I thought I heard a phoebe this morning, but it was only the wind. And this March sky is the color of sullen, the sun dull as a nickel, and my throat still scratchy from the radiator's dry heat. So I heave on my old Land's End long coat, several tons of ethically procured down, grab the worn-out gloves, the wool hat, the Uggs, and begin my solitary walk in the neighborhood, where I'm dazzled by a procession of bare-limbed elms wearing white lace mantillas as they sashay down Lafayette Avenue, no doubt on their way to a fancy dress party on Elmwood, accompanied by the Oratorio Society of Robins and Cardinals, who warble soprano arias from Figaro and practice Mozart's Alleluia Jubilate in 4 parts, a fitting anthem for the opening festivities. At my feet, where snow once obliterated the garden, snowdrops straighten their bent necks through the mud and look around at a lightening sky. And from the dark hedge at the corner, listen, is it a fountain? Yes, an audible spray, bubbles gushing from 1,000 tiny throats, cascading through the melting silence. So now you have something to look forward to, and just so that you remember that, and all of you Sarasotans who happen to come up north to escape the heat, this is for all of you. Summer day. Let's sit here on the porch near the bird feeder, overlooking a sea of wildflowers. Inhale the breath of honeysuckle, purple yarrow, belled foxglove. Watch the languid bees hovering over each delicious blossom, doing their life's work. But don't nod off just yet, drowsy with contentment. If we wait, the birds will come, startling in their finery. Goldfinches and cardinals, chattering like children, vying for a few seeds in suet. Pileated woodpeckers chasing them into the air. Yellow and crimson arcs splashed across a cornflower field. Their songs will lift us, quicken our winter hearts. Wait for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I want to ask if anyone has anything they'd like to say, or questions for our poets, or comments, or general observations. Just let me know, and I will see anybody out there who'd like to say something. Yeah, Paul.
I'm amazed at the wordsmithy from both of these people here today. More importantly, you need to really be observant to be a poet. You have to observe things. Would you not agree? I mean,
That's what it's
one
all
other
about.
thing, do you, either of you, have fragments of thought? You see something happen, you write them down, and then they blossom into a poem.
The question is, and I'll call them up in case you couldn't hear, was about how observant poets have to be, and do either of them ever have just fragments of thought that blossom into a poem?
Yeah.
Is what Paul has asked. So, either of you like to field that?
Sure.
Come on up to the mic though, so people can hear you.
Well, yes, I think, observation is part of what it's all about, but, Paul, I don't particularly carry a notebook with me when I walk. I walk a lot. I think about things that might inspire me, and then when I get home to my desk, that's when I do it. But every poet, I think you'd agree, Meredith, that every poet has a different way of working. Some people work from, they say, I'm going to write poems from 8 to 11 this morning, or every morning. I don't do that, but some people do. So I may have words that I think of when I'm walking, but I don't write them down or have phrases. Thank you.
Yeah. Meredith, do you want to add to that? Yeah, your observation about observation is an excellent point, and I think it's something. I think it's just kind of a cast of mind that I have. I'm just always looking. I'm not necessarily thinking about, I can use that. I just sort of take it all in, and sometimes if I find that I keep thinking about something, or it keeps coming into my mind, I realize that I should write it down, and it might turn into a poem. And then sometimes there'll be something that I think, oh, yeah, I really got to remember that, and I don't write it down, and I'll remember it, and I don't, and it gets away. That happens. But most of the time, it's observations kind of simmer for a while before they turn into a poem. Good question.
Other questions or comments? Do I see any back there? Yes.
I'll make a quick comment. Observation was just mentioned, but there's another piece of it that especially came out here. Remembering emotions, remembering feelings, remembering what you experienced, and using that to explain to others.
Right, the comment was that what was in evidence was remembering emotions, remembering feelings, remembering the past, really, and bringing it. I think as Susan and Meredith both did so beautifully, I think, in their poetry. Yeah, thank you for that observation. Anybody else like to say anything else? Yeah, over there.
Are you writing from outside looking in? Like you wouldn't start the sentence, I this, I that, but from sort of afar, you feel like you're floating over the experience? Or are you inside of it, sort of like I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
Well, do either of you want to feel that? The comment or the question was, are they writing from, at arm's length, I'll say, as if they're floating over a situation, or are they coming from internally as they write? So do either of you want to take that?
Well, I think both. I think, you know, there are emotions that you feel internally, and you write from those. But then, especially in this book, I think I'm observing it from a distance, a lot of it from a distance. What I used to feel and what I don't feel anymore, or how it's changed. So I think it's a combination of both things. But you do start from what you feel, and I think that's part of poetry is going from the personal to the universal, you know. We try, anyway.
Meredith, do you want to add to that? In my experience, that changes over a lifetime. I think maybe when I was younger, I did write more from the inside. You know, you're more concerned with your own feelings, and as you get older, I find that I have a more narrative perspective, and I write sort of stories or narratives about what I remember, and that's more from the outside. But that's an interesting way to kind of slice it.
Well, let's give a hand to our terrific poets today. Thank them for coming. And I hope to see you at our next poetry event, or any other event for that matter.